This afternoon session, again, will be a panel discussion. We're going to be discussing reaching new destinations through innovative teaching and learning. We have 4 panel members, and they will talk with you about their knowledge, their skills, their experiences with online teaching. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to ask some general questions of the panel members, and they will each take turn and address those specific questions. And then we will give you, the audience, an opportunity to provide your feedback. You will have the opportunity to ask any follow-up questions that you have as well. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panel members. First, we have Catherine Langberger. Catherine is a digital instructor in the Department of Global and Sociocultural Studies. Next, we have Deborah Lee Davis, and Deborah is a digital instructor in the Department of Psychology. Next, we have Charles Fiedler, and he is a digital instructor in the Department of Earth and Environment. And our final panel member is Agatha Caraballo, and she's a digital instructor in the Department of Public Administration. Just to mention, there is an evaluation form in your folders, so before you leave this afternoon, if you can take some time and complete that evaluation for us, that would be great. Your feedback is very important to us. So the first question for our panel this afternoon: what do you consider to be some successful achievements of learning outcomes in online versus face-to-face classes? And again, you can decide who goes first, but if each of you could address this question, then we can leave it up for the audience to follow up. And also, please, if you can just speak directly into the mic for recording purposes, that will help.
Yeah, we will.
Thank you.
We just wanted to talk amongst ourselves.
That's right.
I'm going to start with this one, if that's okay. Though, just off the top of my head, the thing that I have noticed in my online courses is that I require a lot more writing in my online courses than I have in my face-to-face courses. And my students' level of skill in their writing assignments has increased exponentially because they are regularly writing every single week, hundreds of words, in the discussions and in a summary assignment that I have for them. And I have really noticed a tremendous difference from the beginning of the semester to the end of the semester at the quality and skill set in writing in a scholarly way. And so that's something that I have noticed as a difference, that it's been better in my online classes than my face-to-face courses.
Yeah, I also have found the same thing. I actually have more writing in my online classes than I did in my face-to-face classes. Part of that, of course, is the reason that, one of those reasons is that there are fewer students in my online classes than in my traditional psychology face-to-face classes, so I could actually spend more time really providing them with feedback about their writing, as well as about their critical thinking skills, which is something that, in a face-to-face class, particularly say you have a class of 150, 200 students, I would be able to talk directly to students and have great engagement, but I'm actually not talking to all of the students. Some are in the back, and so I'm not engaging as much. And so that kind of leads me to another area where I think the online class really does a better job, in that I'm better able to communicate with those students who may not normally speak up in class. Now, engagement, of course, is always a challenge in online classes, but with students that may be very, very shy, or they just don't feel comfortable standing up or asking a question in front of 200 other students, and this way I have a personal way of communicating with them, and they also have a manner in which they can actually connect with some of their fellow students in a way that they would not in a regular classroom.
I definitely agree with that, Deborah. I think it benefits the shy students. You can't sit in the background and kind of listen to the lecture and fly below the radar. If you want to get your discussion board participation credits, you have to speak up and contribute something. And I think that that leads to more self-motivation and more discipline. That, again, if you don't contribute anything, the opportunity's been lost, and everybody has a chance to put in their 2 cents. And I also like that there's not just a small handful of people who are monopolizing the conversation, which happens a lot in a traditional course.
I guess I agree with, and one thing I would add is I think some of the mentality that's in the course, the way it's built, this particular class is, for example, environmental science and sustainability. It takes the idea of learning that is a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday experience and moves it to 24/7, 15 weeks for the semester and beyond. And so students can have the opportunity to engage, interact, share multimedia, really great things whenever they want, whenever they get on, and it's always there. And so I like to call it something called a value net, and casting a larger net. My perspective, whereas our keynote speaker said, that students who have, in saying Korea, who have very different rules and laws about what you can do with trash over there, believe it or not, is extremely enlightening for our students to hear about here. And it can happen because if she's 15 or 6 hours ahead or something, it turns that whole experience into a much more of a value added experience that could be tapped if you did it correctly. So that would be my kind of takeaway just from this question. I know face-to-face classes, people are always learning as well, but even when I was an undergrad or a grad student, it was always, where are you going? I'm going to physics, or I'm going to English, and you have that kind of timing to do the courses, and then when you get out of there, you're on to the next. But it takes everyone, kind of puts them into this world of learning that can be asynchronous and still be pretty rigorous as they go through what applies to their own lives. So that's my thought.
I guess I would add one more thing, I guess, based on how it's there 24/7, is that I have students who, if it wasn't for the online classes, they wouldn't be able to take classes. They work full-time, they have families, some of them have 2 or 3 jobs, and so they may be up at 2 o'clock in the morning doing their work. They may only be doing it on the weekends. And I actually do get a lot of these students who will email me and actually say to me, thank God this was available, because otherwise, I wouldn't be able to pursue my education.
I'd also like to add about finding additional resources. In a lot of my discussion boards, I ask students to find outside resources and provide links. And I think by having all these different perspectives and all of them sharing ideas, they're learning a lot more from each other and providing even resources that I could use in my future classes, because they're finding things that, this fits in great with the class. So it really kind of rounds it out and provides a much deeper experience, I think, because it's really much more diverse depending on what the students provide.
Because I just would like to add one last thing. I think because students necessarily have to take much more responsibility for their learning experience in an online course, that they are actually creating much more of that experience than, I present them with, this is what I know about this in my field at this point in time. This is the sum total, and I know how to get more information about things that interest you. And so I assist them in their own, discovery of sociology. And I think there's more ownership that way. And so I think they have a little bit of a deeper learning experience whenever they feel like they're more at the helm.
Just as a follow-up, are you able to kind of tell the story, or kind of designate your students in terms of, for instance, in the traditional classroom, you could almost tell early on that the ones who sit to the front of the class are more than likely going to be the ones who succeed, by the end of the semester. Could you, in the online environment, pinpoint certain things, the students who respond less, they're more likely the ones who wouldn't get or wouldn't achieve a good grade. And could you kind of like pinpoint those students, like in your online classes? Do you have?
I would say yes, particularly when you look at not only things such as how much do they participate, but the quality of the work and the discussions and those things that they provide. You can really see a difference in terms of a student who is very interested and involved and how much thought and effort they put into even a discussion post than a student who is not as involved or perhaps doesn't feel as comfortable. I've also, noticed a difference between who, in terms of my students, are more likely to contact me and are more likely to contact me really frequently. They really tend to put more effort into the class, and those students, they're not always the A students or the B students. Sometimes they're the students that they just really want to do well and they're struggling, but they have a lot of motivation.
I'm wondering if the data will show that, high achievers versus low achievers, but more so, I'm wondering if the data shows that the students that are more tech savvy are the ones who succeed over the ones who are less tech savvy. You wouldn't be able to say,
I don't think we'd really be able to say, because that's not really data that we particularly look at. However, these days, online classes have become so much more mainstream that the students that tend to take online classes these days are quite different from even the students from 3 years ago, because it's considered more normal.
do you have any follow-up questions from the audience? Any comments?
I'd like to say, go ahead. Also, in response to your question, Chantel, that I have been humorously surprised at how easy it is to pick out the people in my class, in my online classes, just in the same way it is in my face-to-face classes. When I have an Adobe Connect session, it's so funny how the same dynamics can be created in cyberspace. And so you get the person who's sitting in the front and trying to monopolize the conversation. And so I'm going down the list of people saying, hey, what do you think about this, Marion? What do you think about this? What do you think? Pointing and clicking in a sense like I would in a regular face-to-face situation. And then I've got the people who are just attending and not saying anything. And then I've got the people who show up 10 minutes late and they ask the question that actually makes me want to have to repeat everything that I just said for the last 10 minutes. And you know what I mean? And all of that stuff happens online in the same way. And then, of course, the students who show up and they don't have to ask me, do I need to get the book for this? They don't have to, they just get in there and they start doing their work. And, those are the ones that are, have always been in face-to-face and online, have been the ones who excel. And I've got the ones who are now, 2 weeks before the end of the semester who are still saying, we're required to participate in this little assignment, and I had no idea, are the ones who are not. And so, yeah, it does. It's really interesting to me how those dynamics recreate themselves.
My question is kind of a refinement of the large question on the PowerPoint, which is if any of you have taught the same class online and face-to-face and made a concerted effort to look at outcomes, so maybe evaluate the same project with the same rubric to see how the learning compared, or a paper, or maybe test results.
I actually have. I've taught the same class online and face-to-face, and both actually in psychology and computer science. And what I found overall is that I'm not finding a very big difference. If I look at individually from semester to semester, sometimes the online class does better, sometimes the face-to-face class will do better, but really putting it all together, I really haven't found a difference.
An assessment of my online class versus my in-classroom class, and what I found was that we gave the same test at the beginning and at the end of the semester, And the online students score much higher at the beginning of the semester than the in-classroom students, by a lot. The in-classroom score about 9 points, and the online students score 20 points. And then by the end of the semester, they both score about 32 points. So they, at the end of the semester, you found like there was no difference, but they really started out very different. So that may tell about how assortment between the online students and the in-classroom.
Any other questions?
Oh, yes. This idea that online the students can be there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I want to challenge that as being a myth. Because last time I taught the online course, a student challenged me on some of the submissions that weren't showing up in her grade book. And I would go in there and I would say, yeah, but you didn't post them. And so I had to go through a special intensive thing, drilling down into the Blackboard data to figure out who's attending and who's online and who's not. And I was amazed at the patterns, because it's the dates that things are due. The students online, in other words, they're not on there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're there just in a short period of time right before the things are due, which is what's happening in the classrooms when you have assignments too. So in other words, for those who are working and all, they may be able to do some things online, but when in actuality, it's still driven by the deadlines and their.
I should say what my understanding of what Chuck said was actually a little bit different from yours. My understanding was not that he was saying that the students are there 24 hours, but the learning environment is available 24 hours. And I looked at my logs of my students all the time, which is how I know some of them are online at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I think that's an advantage, but you're absolutely right that most of these students, when they know that it's due, that's when they're logging in. And you have that group that waits until, if it's due at 11:59, they're logging in at 11:45.
That's
Yeah.
actually a tweak I had to make to my classes and giving my discussion boards, requiring that their original post be due several days before the deadline so that there was enough time for responses, because if everybody's waiting till Sunday night, then, okay, maybe there's an hour to respond to everybody's post. So putting it a couple of days forward kind of prompts them to do it a little early so that there's more time to review and provide some kind of meaningful feedback under.
I actually went ahead and integrated that as an element of my rubric. So now I have engagement on my rubric. Did you respond within 1 to 2 days of the question? Within 3 to 4 days? Did you respond in 5 and 6? And they get points for how quickly they respond. And so it's made it, because I was having that same issue that Agatha was talking about, where if you're supposed to respond to others, but others aren't getting on there and saying anything, then how can you respond? And so once I made it worth some points to light a fire under you, then it picked up people's response rates.
Yeah, I do something similar, except where I have a specific deadline for this is when your original post is, and this is when you have to respond. I spread it out over 2 weeks, where they have 1 week for the original post, and they have 1 week to respond. And that helped me get rid of complaints like, but I only can work on the weekend. I can only do my class on the weekend. So they still have it available on the weekend. And I actually did find that, just like both of you, that did make a difference in terms of people really getting the discussions done and getting them just done well.
Okay, great. We're going to go ahead and move on to the second question. What are some of the most and least successful teaching and engagement tools or strategies in the humanities and science disciplines?
Go first if you don't. I'm actually just finished grading my capstone classes for Integrative Seminar in Public Administration, and I've tried to make it as practical as possible, reaching out to real organizations, asking them to submit issues, and then reiterating to these students that this paper is going to a real person in a real organization, to help them try to make that transition from writing for professionals and writing for practitioners, to try and make it more real to them. It hasn't worked out so well the first semester. I kind of think I have to put it in there a couple more times to reiterate it. Some got it, but just try and tie it into real actual situations, whether it's case studies. So it's not just, okay, come up with something, and it's an arbitrary paper that's not really going to serve you well afterwards.
I think one of the, it's a little controversial to some, but not to me, and it does have some issues. One of the most successful, I guess, tools that I've used for engagement as well as learning is actually having them do group work. And when I say that, you have to be, it's a little controversial, you do have to be careful because especially at the beginning of the semester and that first group assignment, it's usually terrible and they're all complaining. And then I have them rate each other. And then they realize, they realize that if they don't contribute, they don't get a grade. And they also realize that their fellow teammates are not going to be riding on their backs if they do the work. And then I tend to see a significant difference between the first group assignment and then the second and the third group assignment. And one of the reasons that I really like this, in addition to helping them learn the content, is it also helps them learn to work with other people. And they hate when I tell them this. They hate when I tell them that, when you go out into the workforce, chances are you're not going to be working in a team of one. But it really helps them figure out how to work with each other and also how to work with each other remotely, which is something that more and more in the workplace is being asked for. So they can actually go into the workforce when they're going into an interview and they can talk about how they have worked with these tools and they've worked online and they've worked remotely with other people. I still always get some complaints, but I actually get thank you emails from students.
Oh, that's great.
By the end of the semester. Even the ones that initially complained, and then I'll give them some ideas, and I'm like, okay, try this, go talk, do this, and this with your, this, and this with your group. And the vast majority of the time, they work things out, and I actually have gotten some of the best work out of the groups that initially had some little issues.
I want to actually talk to you about group work because I did a group assignment a couple of years ago, and the results were so awful that I still have PTSD from just how awful it was. And it was kind of a sad thing for me because I did a lot of really successful face-to-face group work, teaching face-to-face classes. And so I definitely need to hone my skills in doing group activities online because there was just basically a failure to collaborate at all. And I was looking at a 40% failure rate. And it was just awful. So I ended up turning it into a completely different assignment in the middle of the semester. And, you guys need to hear the truth about, as well as our successes, that sometimes we try something and it doesn't work, and who here can say that they haven't flopped in a classroom, in some way, shape, or form. So, but anyway, that was my, I'm still processing it.
If I could mention one thing based on what you talk about with, we sometimes fail. I guess if I really have to think about it, I think the biggest tool, the greatest tool is trying new things. And seeing what works and seeing what doesn't and getting feedback from your students and seeing what their level of learning is. But just realizing that some things aren't going to work. And you learn from that too. When I do that, I tend to be very honest with my students. Oh, we're going to try something new. You guys are my guinea pigs. Yay. But it'll be easier when I grade you. But that I would say, just trying new things probably is the thing that overall is most successful because even if it doesn't work, I've still consider it a success, because at least I learned something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that you had mentioned, the group work didn't work for you, and you considered some other things. Do you want to touch on any other tool that you had incorporated as a result?
Oh, well, you know what I've done? And I'm actually kind of working on making this shift right now in my courses toward self-evaluation in my students. And because what I had done was it was a group peer evaluations that I was attempting in the class, and that was the thing that had failed. So I've been looking at the literature and looking at the pedagogy and the philosophy and the research behind, self-evaluation, and I'm feeling like it's pretty sound, and I'm kind of really moving forward with that. And so that, and Blackboard kind of makes it possible to do that in a really easy way by using the survey tool.
I want to know, Deborah, did you let the students assign themselves to their own groups, or did you pick the groups, and did the groups stay the same through the semester?
I've tried both ways, and I actually haven't found much of a difference. I do find that students like being able to choose their own group, even though they don't know anyone in class, because then they feel, I guess, a little bit more empowered. But when it comes to outcomes, I actually have not found a difference. And I know that there's some people who teach online that do not, or even face-to-face, that do not allow people to change groups. I do. And, but they need to do it through me, basically. It doesn't happen very often, because the first thing I always tell them is try to work it out with your group first. But sometimes it doesn't work, and I will switch them to a new group. But I'm also very upfront about this with my students from the beginning of the semester, where I do expect them to collaborate, not just cooperate, which they have difficulty grasping. But I don't know. I guess some people who don't allow them to change groups, they have their own philosophies and reasons, and it seems to work for them. It just happens that it's worked for me to allow them to change groups. But usually they're so invested. By the time they get into that second assignment, now they're invested, and now they really want to do better. And not very often do I get requests for changes.
Also done it both ways, where I've allowed them to pick their groups and then other times be assigned with groups. What I found is when I provide a general topic, so let's say if there's 3 groups, federal government, state government, local government, allows them to kind of go wherever their interests are. So their paper might be a little bit more engaged because it's something that actually captures their interest, as opposed to just being assigned a topic that they really don't care about.
I have noticed about groups is that they do tend to naturally emerge even in the online environment. And so I've noticed in my discussions, for example, that the same people respond to each other's posts. And so they form groups, they just evolve in the discussions. And so the same group of people is having a continual discussion throughout the course of the semester. And so that's been an interesting observation for me too.
I just wanted to share a couple of things that I've observed when I've been teaching online. We're talking about teaching and engagement tools. So one of the things that I've taught in my GIS class, just as an example, is using social engagement, or engagement in the community. So for example, in my geographic information systems class, it's digital cartography or mapping. Well, what's a social way of doing that? Well, one of the things that I have my students do as part of an assignment is geocaching. So geocaching, if for those of you who don't know, is the biggest treasure hunt you've never ever heard of. There are about, I would say conservatively, 60,000 geocaches within Miami-Dade and Monroe counties. And it's people who have hidden treasure in Tupperware, in little Tupperware containers, and you have to use geographic clues to find them, either with your smartphone or a GPS. And then as you get closer to them, you have to look at different things in the environment to find these different treasures, and it has a logbook. And so what I have my students do is go on a treasure hunt. And they do these, usually do it in groups. They do it with their families sometimes if they don't live near anyone else. But they absolutely love it. And it's a way for them to get out and do something different and engage with other members of the community, with their family, get their friends involved. Some of them have taken dates on these little adventures. But the point is that there are opportunities in our social environment that we should really start thinking about, just like geocaching. And it's something that my students just absolutely love. And it's a way for them to actively get involved in geography. So that's just one suggestion that I have, is to take a look in the community and see what kind of things are out there already that you could use as teaching tools in your classes.
I completely agree with that. And basically almost every class that I teach, I require students to attend at least one public meeting a semester. If you really want to know how public administration works in the public sector, the only way you can really do that is by attending a public meeting. It can be any public meeting. It can fit anything. And if you really can't attend it, yes, you can watch one online or on TV and write a summary about it. But really, as much as I can lecture and I can tell you, you have to see how it actually happens in the real world.
Was there a question? Sorry.
No, but it's a question for Debbie about groups. So if you want to comment about engagement.
Oh, please ask Debbie.
Okay. So I had I guess a similar experience to Kathleen, and I wanted to ask you for advice on how to deal with some of the issues, because in my online class, I put all my students in group in alphabetical order, so it's easier for me to grade them. So every week they have a group blog. They only discuss with 10 students. They have no issues there, but this semester I decided that I was gonna also give them a wiki page that they had to create in the group, one wiki page. And I gave them 2 weeks, 1 week to prepare and 1 week to finalize it and turn it in. So on the second week, of course, it's the second week, and they're running, procrastinating. So I had more than a couple groups, a few groups who emailed me constantly because such and such was being rude to them, where they texted them, and she responded this way, and he responded this way. He's not doing anything. I emailed him 2 days ago, and blah, blah. So I felt, yes, and I guess I could say that I might have PTSD after this too. So at the end, it was so many issues that I had to, instead of grade them in group, I had to grade them individually. And the rubric already contained 2 of the elements, 2 of the categories were individual graded, but the entire page content, font, attractiveness, it was gonna be graded in group, but I had to do it individually. So I guess my question is, did you have any of those issues and how you dealt with it, with the issues of personalities? I guess that was the issue, personalities.
Those always happen.
Unavoidable.
The way I deal with them now, and keep in mind, it's not like I first started using groups and started doing all this. This is from dealing with the same type of thing. There are a number of different things that I do to try to deal with that. One is that when I have them do a group project like a wiki, because I do use wikis, there's more than one during the semester. Because the first one is always a disaster. Always, they do terrible on it. But I already know that. But I also use that as an education tool for them, because the things that they're most concerned about when it comes to working with groups is, am I gonna do all the work and then everyone else gets the grade? They don't do anything and they get the same grade as me. That's not fair. Or someone who's like, yeah, I'm going to coast along, let them do the work, and I get a grade. So I make it really clear to them, and I'm very explicit about this, that is something that is not acceptable, that once that assignment is turned in, it is required that everyone in the group goes and rates everyone else in terms of their effort and their quality and their ability to work collaboratively in a group. And when I get an email that is complaining about someone in the group, one of the things I will always do, I'll say, thank you for letting me know. Make sure that when you do your review of your group members that you include this information because it will affect their grade. And I can tell you the biggest shock to people is that when they see their grade and they see that it in fact has impacted their grade, most of them will immediately turn around and all of a sudden, now they're really trying to make sure that they work with their group. And I found that in general, having an approach like that, they force themselves to be more congenial. Now, of course, I also do the typical, you have to be professional. I expect you to treat this as if it's your job and you are dealing with someone in the workplace. I have no tolerance for bullying and name calling and those sorts of things. And so putting those things in place really seems to help, providing them with a lot of feedback on that first assignment, both in terms of the quality of the assignment as well as how they seem to have worked together as a group, because you can always tell, even without even looking, even without looking at the ratings of each other. The ratings help. But even without looking at the ratings of each other, you can always tell, and you just have to make sure that you're going to feel comfortable with providing them with that information. Because I know some people aren't comfortable with saying, well, your fellow group members said that you only did this much work, therefore this is your grade, and then they'll come back and complain, oh, but I did this, is it? I made it very clear. Here's the rubric, here's how it's going to be applied. This includes, your group work. So if you don't want this to happen again, you and your group are just going to have to work it out.
Give you a sneak peek. That is a fantastic idea, and a lot of times what we do encourage with group work is doing peer reviews and peer evaluations. We are piloting a tool this summer. It's called iPeer. It's going to seamlessly integrate with Blackboard. You'll be able to enter rubrics. The students can go in, do their self-evaluation, evaluate their group members. You can set it up by score, and those scores will go right into your grade book. So, coming soon.
Oh, that'll be awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah, I do it on Qualtrics right now, so I have to kind of, had to create my own. Yeah.
If you're interested, let me know. I'm not sure if they've chosen professors to do that, but absolutely.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm always signed up, yeah. I want to, oh, I'm sorry. Poor Chuck.
Hey, don't worry about it. I'm enjoying taking it all in too,
I want to say just quickly too that I use Adobe Connect and in my classes, and that gives me tremendous engagement with students, and it's just real online time and I actually, they have an option with the assignment. They can either attend and participate in the discussion or activity, or they can watch a recording of it and submit a summary. And lo and behold, they choose to attend and participate. And so I get great participation, and it's really been good in terms of engagement. And I also use StudyMate, and StudyMate provides students with the opportunity also to play games with each other. I mean, it's simple games, it's not like wizard games or, it's not like that. But with the course material, they can quiz themselves and do crosswords and play hangman and, little things like that. And so those have helped in terms of engagement as well. Just to give you some successes.
Oh, I'll just add briefly. I agree that there is that expectation of you writing your syllabus, how are you going to do group work and all this. It's university level. They've signed up for your class to be there and do the work, and they're paying, or whoever someone's paying. But I also believe that the instructor is there to also model the engagement that we would want the students to do. So if you never ever see your faculty member engage the students or send notes to them or email them or engage them outside of just the thing that you're having them do, then they're not going to just pop up and say, oh, let me wake up in the morning and go engage my professor in all this. So if you show them that you're interested in them in the course, they can return, show you that hopefully their work is done better. And instead of just having the connotation of if you don't this, if you don't that, I kind of look at it as like, look, if you do this, look everything what we're sharing. I know it sounds a little utopian, but it seems to actually spawn some learning. It's not 100% foolproof, of course, but it's one approach to take to help engage students in some of these tools. And I understand that we cannot physically answer every single person's discussion that they post, right? But if you engage and make your discussions into a way that's not 65 responses of what does the EPA stand for, you know, and then you can do it in ways that are a little bit more engaging, and then they do migrate into groups. It's naturally, this weird thing just emerges. And it can work that way. So just throw a little spin onto it and how I approach it. I minimally will send 3 to 4 emails or messages to them per week, above and beyond anything in class, just of something of interest, of whatever is going on. Like, did you know nuclear power is in Florida? Yeah. They said, what? Check out, you know, look at it. So they were like, ooh, I didn't know we had nuclear power in Florida. And so it was just out of the blue. Last night I was emailing the student, and she said, I didn't know that Florida Light and Power has nuclear power plants. It's like, well, now you know. But it wouldn't go on that. But anyway.
Glad you brought up there, because I think it is, we have to model the engagement that we want to see, and it's actually something that we're going to bring up in our digital instruction lecture next week, is that some professors have the misconception that once you build the class, you just step back and let it run itself. That you never have to check in, you don't really have to do anything. And I get emails from students responding, wow, you responded within a couple of days. I've been waiting for a response for this professor for a month. So again, you have to show them the level and be there and show your presence, not just in putting everything out there.
I actually get students who apologize for asking me questions. I feel so bad, you know, because I try to, to always respond very quickly. But one of the things that they do tell me, and that I have encountered in my own department, is there are professors who, that's what they believe, and they're sticking to their guns, and they don't understand why an online class would be any work.
They made that the closing of every announcement. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to contact me. I mean, it seems repetitive, but I put it in every message. Don't be scared to email.
Mm-hmm. Okay, do we have any other questions from the audience? Any feedback on question 2? Okay, we're going to move on. Question 3, how have you incorporated social media, that's Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, etc., into your online classes to communicate with your students? Has this strategy been helpful or harmful to you or your students?
I make it an extra credit for them to create a LinkedIn profile. I don't care if you put anything on there, but you should have a LinkedIn profile and join our FIU Public Administration group. Just because we send out department announcements, job leads, just kind of anything. And we find that they're more responsive to that than the emails that we get from the department. And not only that, it starts them thinking about their professional life after graduation and start creating that professional, you're fine if you have Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, whatever. But if for professional presence, go with the LinkedIn account.
Yeah, for my computer science students in particular, they are kind of drilled by the department itself to create a LinkedIn account. And I always encourage them to make sure that they connect with me, because sometimes they feel as if, they shouldn't be because, well, I'm not someone that, may want to hear from them or something like that. Yet what I try to explain to them is that it really is quite important, especially in the IT field, that you do have that presence and that you do have that connection with people who are going to have an understanding of what your skills and abilities are. I have found that in the world of psychology, a lot of students don't even know what LinkedIn is, and they're not quite certain of what it can help them with, even if I explain to them, what LinkedIn is for, and that it's for professional development, for making professional connections and networking and those sorts of things, and even getting information on what's out there in industry. You know, there are groups that you can join. So that actually is one of my challenges in psychology. That seems to work very, very well in computer science. So I think there is also a disparity in terms of how important it seems to be depending on what field students are thinking about going into. I haven't quite solved that problem yet, but I'm working on it.
Yeah, I agree. I use it a bit to an extent because the stuff that we work on is inherently social in nature. And all of those other agencies or organizations or institutions or community gardens or whatever it is, they all seem to have a Facebook or some sort of social media page or a YouTube account. There's like a surf riders club that take care of a bunch of surfers that love the beach. So they go and do some beach stuff, and all their messages are communicated through these particular social media portals. But I think, to go back to that value net, I always talk about is some of our faculty actually go do research on oceanic going vessels in the Aleutian Islands to drill core samples of the Earth that are like 6,000 meters deep. It's insane. It's awesome. That ship has a Facebook page, right? So you could actually direct your students to go look at that Facebook page and watch exactly where the ship sailed, who's on this ship, the captain and the crew, what nationalities they're from. You can translate it in about 15 different languages. It's amazing. So that's what I mean about this value added. How can we bring that into the course? I could do that if we were in this room and I showed you here, but it's also something that they can do when they sit down at night and they do their work and they just start clicking. It's pretty amazing what they can find. So I actually do myself try to use it. I do not have it linked to my own my own Facebook page, but it is my own personal YouTube account. So one of the things I will be interested in as we continue is to help people like yourselves who are interested in this develop more official channels of FIU department channels and YouTube and things like that. Sorry, FIU Online folks. I think they're already doing that too. But so do we need official FIU permission or to make something? I probably would feel better if I had the permission from the FIU
You could do it
online.
with or without a permission.
What I do is I post it to my own YouTube account and then I link that to my pages. So far it's just my own stuff. I haven't tagged it as this is official communications from FIU. But it would be nice to have that. Exactly. More professional too.
That you're not representing the university as a whole, just as an instructor in your particular class.
There's also something about some particular logos you can and can't use or something. But it's all like on the web. You can read, if you do this, use this logo kind of thing. But
I know in my department, I was asked to create a Twitter account, a Facebook, a LinkedIn. So, I mean, it was really kind of with the blessing and guidance of my department.
yeah, I just think the problem is who's going to manage all of it. I mean, we're only one person. I mean, we can't do all of this because it's just physically impossible. So the idea is to build a critical mass of this stuff that can be self-sustaining across, I think, courses and departments to kind of seamlessly integrate online programming, hybrid programming, face-to-face courses into, a university learning experience, including all of the extracurricular stuff that's around, and tie it all in. So.
We've been experimenting in my department, and I'm doing the Pinterest, and we tried to get some grad students to do that. They were not as consistent, even though it was part of their job. But we're doing, I have my own Facebook page, but we have a department Facebook page, which we've had some intense arguments over, surprisingly. So in our case, they've kind of been strict about who's going to be allowed to post things. And, you know, there's debate over whether it should, you know, how academic it needs to be, or is it for, you know, what is the purpose? What is the role going to be of this social media? And how are we going to represent ourselves as a department? I'm doing the Instagram in our department and some other things. But I've also been using inside of Blackboard, there are groups. Like I've made a couple of groups where I post things for topics that I teach on, and that and I've made them open for other, like people from other universities can join, and I have been having people join. So, and then I tell my students that, you know, if they like, they can join as well. So that's been a little bit more, I think, successful in some ways, because some students want to keep it separate. They don't want you on their Facebook page either. So. Yeah, I just want to mention the idea that creating a lot of, you know, this contact with social media, you know, sometimes people think you just kind of create it and it just kind of perpetuates itself, except if you really want it to work, you do need to have a plan. You need to really think about what are you going to be using it for? You know, what is the scope, what is the point? And you have to maintain it, and maintaining it also includes adding information, making these connections, and so in addition to a plan, you also have to, as you said, make sure you have time to do that. And I actually would say that's probably my biggest challenge. You know, I use YouTube extensively, and I do a lot on LinkedIn, but I have not used Twitter, I have not used Instagram, because I know I don't have time. You know, so it's just something to really think about.
I know just 2 weeks ago I attended the
Test one.
FIU online conference, and several awards were given out, and I think one of them was given to a nursing faculty member who had incorporated social media into her classes, and I think she had done, in FIU Online's opinion, a tremendous, an extraordinary job at incorporating social media. And then later on that afternoon, in a breakout session, that same nursing faculty member had presented along with one of the, yes, and you know, they talked about social media and how to incorporate it into your classes. But I remembered her talking about how she utilized Facebook to communicate with her students, and how, you know, their level of communication had skyrocketed as a result of her using that social media to reach out to them. So I know, you know, utilizing Facebook and Twitter, those are definitely welcomed by FIU Online. So it seems like it's definitely the way to go.
I've utilized, by the way, just YouTube mashups in my courses all the time. But I have not gone down the road of Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and it just, I want to think long and hard, just like Deborah said, but really plan and think long and hard about, you know, exactly what the purpose of it will be, and, you know, exactly how much time I can afford to spend on it. And because you know, I'm very careful about what my boundaries are in online education, because it, you know, it could be, I mean, it could take up my entire life, and yeah. So I don't want to go there.
So I wanted to comment a little bit on Facebook too. I was in the online conference, and I was intrigued about it, maybe included on my online class as well. But I've read in the past that the young people who are in Facebook, they like to keep separate Facebook and school. And we were having a discussion during lunch, and I was saying that this semester in one of my face-to-face classes, one of the projects that students had to do in group was to create a website of an issue And I actually heard, now that we're towards the end of the semester, several groups, it wasn't just one, several groups who said, we didn't want to use Facebook because we don't think it's professional. And so I think, I mean, we want to incorporate because we're thinking, okay, they're all into this, but I think also we have to be cognizant about the fact that students themselves, we don't know, I mean, have anyone asked them, right? Because we always want to do these things because we say, oh, for student engagement, but are we really going to engage them, or they think it's not going to be the same thing? Because, I mean, I did hear it, that they didn't think it was professional, so they just went another route.
I think, I'm sorry.
I was going to say that, you know, there are also issues that some students will not want to use things like Facebook or Twitter because of privacy reasons, because of security reasons. And so those are things that you also need to think about, because those actually are very, very legitimate and serious concerns. So just things to be cognizant of.
One of the reasons that I'm actually considering moving in that direction, I've been studying course evaluation for online courses recently, and just kind of reviewing the literature and experimenting with my own course evaluation in my courses, and some of the ideas that they have are, you know, to send out tweets to people to, you know, in order to increase engagement with the online evaluation instrument. And I'm thinking, wow, that's kind of creative, you know, with a link right in there to take you directly to the survey, so that they could just on their phone while they're waiting in line at the grocery store go click, 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 and evaluate you. So I don't know. It's just something I'm ruminating about right now, and I apologize for the rudeness of my technology.
Last semester, for a group project, I gave students a choice to either present live on Adobe Connect or to record themselves and upload it to YouTube. So that was another use of technology. And I personally love the Khan Academy videos from my stats class, because I feel like he does a great job of summarizing in 5 minutes what I could spend an hour talking about.
If I could make one note on that, I actually have my students do presentations all the time and have them record each other and actually have them put these on YouTube. And if they're actually worried about putting it on their personal account, I tell them, well, make another account. And
So I'll make it private and then just send me the link, and I'm the only person that can see it.
right.
Under whatever name you want.
Yeah, and so I think it's not just us going to them with using these tools, it's also them coming to us. Because I actually have students who I do follow their Twitter account.
Wow.
You know, they're, you know.
You're my
not the
hero
ones who-
today.
Yeah, not the ones who are just talking about their friends, but, you know.
Right.
You know, they have ones that are actually relevant to their major.
I just wanted to add regarding Facebook and Twitter. I don't have them linked to my classes either, but I think they're, for me, invaluable source of keeping your classes current. Because every organization and association in the world has a Facebook and Twitter account, and they're constantly articles. So we just post, hello all, drugs and crime in the news today, here's a link. Have a look at it. I get so many videos and articles on Facebook and Twitter.
If you want a quick and easy way to integrate Twitter into your courses, there's a couple really fun things we talked already about. But you can create a hashtag for your class, hashtag Psych 101, or hashtag FIU Psych 101, and tell your students to hashtag that every time they post something. And we can actually create a widget and put the Twitter feed right into your course. So we could put it as like the first thing, and like anything that would come up, you know, psychology or any like specific organizations, like you said, every organization has a Twitter account. We can feed those into the course if you just wanted a quick and easy way to add it without, to try and test it out before you start using it as a grading tool or something like that.
There's a very practical application going back to the BAS question. This semester for my integrative seminar class, I asked the students, one of the assignments was to look at whether the town of Davie should adopt social media, whether they should have an official Facebook or Twitter page. So it would require the students to look at how local municipalities or other organizations are using Twitter, so it kind of made it a little bit more relevant and current.
Lastly, I just think it's about expectations. You know, I mean, if you are going to be in the class and you want to use these particular applications, tell them up front, and they'll know what they're getting into. You know, if they have a big problem with it, then they can email you separately, and you can talk about things. But if it's a part of the class, like Ted says, especially in all of our fields or my field, I'm staring at this little eco bottle symbol in my face. And like, this stuff is everywhere, and they're making a ton of money off of this thing. But wouldn't that be cool if someone could just look at this? We just talked about this in class. Isn't this what we're talking about? And it really brings you into today's events. But be expectations. Put it on the syllabus. First day class, when they show up, you know you're going to have this and this account going or whatever, and you can go with it from there.
Okay, any other comments, follow-up questions? Great. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to question 4. What have you done or what could be done to enhance online course evaluations, to improve students' response rates and teaching? I think, Catherine, you had mentioned earlier about evaluating your courses, so you may want to start with this question.
I've been investigating this recently, and last semester I created my first, evaluation that I'm just putting into my individual courses, so they'll be wedded to those courses, but I've also been, I started tracking that. So I made a database last semester, and learned how to download and clean up the data from the survey tool in Blackboard, and kind of organized it the way that my idiosyncratic brain works, and. But I've also been looking at the literature and like compiling a list of ideas that people use to increase the response rates for their course evaluations, and actually looking at, does that really work? Does it really work to offer extra credit and what we're finding essentially so far in my review of the literature, what I'm finding is you can do it or not do it, and nothing really seems to matter except for the level of engagement of the professor with the students throughout the class. If you are an engaged professor, if you are in there, if you, throw out an announcement at that, the time and explain to them why evaluations are important, it's all about, that is the single most factor that's emerging out of this literature as, increasing the response rate on student evaluations. And it's been interesting for me to do that.
I actually started doing my own evaluations for my classes after I saw the dismal response rate.
Yeah, I know. It's
last semester.
3.
Yeah, I think one class of some 80 students, I think 2 students responded, and so I've made my own. I tried looking at some of the best practices, not as much as you have, but and so I'm collecting that data specifically for my class. So that I can look at it and it can help me make improvements in the class. One of the things that, I hate to sound negative, but one of the things about the FIU level one is that as an instructor, I don't know when they do it. I don't have a link that I can encourage students to go to.
Right.
Nothing. I had a couple of students who told me, oh, well, I got an email. But most students were just clueless about it, and so I happen to really like getting feedback from my students. To me, it's an incredibly valuable tool to help improve my classes, so I created my own. Now I am giving them extra credit.
Right. Yeah.
But I guess we'll see how it goes after the semester. I've used them periodically to get feedback on changes that I make to to assignments, or in terms of the types of content that I include, and I've made changes that way. But this is my first semester where I'm doing actually a full-blown, analyze the course and analyze me.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm doing. And I was reading, talking about the extra credit thing, I was reading a study that had been done using the extra credit as an incentive in a face-to-face class and in online classes, and in neither did it have a significant effect on increase or decreasing, and it had no effect on the response rate of the. So I found that to be really interesting, because it's one of the things that people have been tossing around whenever I'm engaged in conversations just with my colleagues about this. Really, am I going to have to offer extra credit for to have people evaluate me? And no, you don't. All it has to do with is you being engaged. And what's interesting is that the university-wide, I had a very low response rate, less than 5%, I would say, from the university-wide evaluation. But for the evaluation that I created and put into my my class, I had, at least 40% response from that. And that was just the first time around, without any incentives or without any, blasting out anything. And I really didn't do anything except, whew, got it done, and in the course, so.
It's kind of directed towards FYU Online. I wish there was a mechanism that there was some kind of pop-up window that students had to complete the evaluation before they could log into their class, so that they had no choice around it. They had to complete it to be able to go into the class, and no ignoring it. Even if they just put no comment or average, they at least have to open up the link.
Just to add,
I believe where it went is that the university, it's more centralized with the university, so we don't really have access to it. There is, I want to say it's with research, they have actually a tutorial for the students on how to do it. But if you talk to your instructional designer and let them know, I can tell them Patty told you. And I can send you to the website where that is, and we can stick that in your course. I don't know the exact dates, but I want to say the evaluations are 2 weeks before the end of the semester when the students get that email. Surprise. But it's around that time, so you could put in, a watch out for this, and if you don't know what to do, here's how to get to it.
Just a few questions for the panel. I know, Catherine, you said that you went ahead and designed your own course evaluation. How did you do that? Did you use Qualtrics to develop that survey? Also, in terms of the questions, how are they related to the university-wide questions? Of course, you want to know that you're assessing for rigor, et cetera. How are your questions related? Are they the same questions that's on the university-wide survey?
No, they're actually tailored to information that I want to have about teaching this particular class, medical sociology, for example. And so I use the Quality Matters rubric whenever I design my courses. And so I kept in mind that rubric whenever I was designing the course evaluation. Because Quality Matters is all about, are you meeting your objectives? And so, I just designed it within the Blackboard survey, using the Blackboard survey tool, and you can just download the information into an Excel file from there, and I'm an Excel geek. I love nothing but a nice spreadsheet.
I'll just add real quick, my brief comment. Oh, did you have a question?
I just have an answer to the question about
Yeah.
I'm taking an online class right now. The evaluation forms, I've received 4 emails about it so far, and I think they started about 2 weeks ago. And I think it's through, the students can fill it out from 2 weeks ago through the end of the semester. Where does it go? Well, I received emails about it, and if they go to myfiu.edu, it's there. And also in the course, there's maybe in the course, and when you log into Blackboard, there's a link to it there. And then it's set up for just the courses that you're in that you can evaluate. You can only do it one time, from experience.
Just a quick note, when I put together the one that I'm using this semester, I actually did research on what are some best practices in terms of the types of questions to ask. I looked at surveys that have been used where they've actually done research to validate the survey, and I put a couple of those together. So it is more, the one that I have is definitely more in depth and more extensive than what I guess the standard FIU evaluation is, because I want more information and information that I can use to really improve my course.
And I think the thing is, too, is, because I asked them not only about did I meet the course objectives, but I asked them about each tool that I use and how that tool helped them in learning medical sociology, for example. Every assignment that I used and how well that assignment, did it build your writing skills? Did it build your, so I'm asking them a lot of really in-depth questions about, what they learned in my class and how they learned it. But the literature review that I've been doing has been showing that the most important thing is that you follow up on the stuff that you get in the responses you get in your evaluations. Because, if professors treat it as if it's meaningless by doing nothing, then students are going to treat it as if it's meaningless and not do it and not be interested or engaged in that process.
If I can add one more thing too, I think, this is it's a serious issue. It definitely warrants a discussion on a higher level. Faculty members creating their own course evaluations would probably mean that once the student completes your evaluation, let's just say they were to get the FIU evaluation, they may feel like, oh, I've already done this, and then they ignore that. So, I could see some issues arising as a result of, faculty doing their own thing. So I think there needs to be more of a discussion about it.
My comment follows both of you, and what I've tried to do is I've tried to have each element is actually focused on one of the aspects of the course and the actual functioning and the content. And I do one in one of the weeks early in the semester where there's not other things being asked of them, so it's almost like a third of the way into the semester where I'm actually asking them, well, these things that we've already worked on, which one has been most effective for you? And this idea of following up, I found if I follow up in the next couple before the end of the semester, then they actually appreciate it as the instructor being engaged in improving the course. And so it's just not if we're doing evaluations to figure out if the course is working right, not for the university, but for our own improvement, just don't do it at the end. Do it up earlier. Yeah.
Do it earlier.
And I was going to, sorry, Isis, I see. Well, all I was going to say is that I think Chantel and everyone here is right. I mean, it's a huge issue right now for us because there's evaluating and looking at evaluations of your own teaching and learning outcomes and student learning gains or if there are any. And then there's evaluations of how they saw you as the instructor and how many hours they thought they spent a week spent reading your course stuff. They're totally kind of different sets of things that they're measuring. But we are, because of the Sunshine State Law, everyone is accessible to all our evaluations that are technically legally from the university. So we're talking about two different things, but the issue is still the same. The concept of evaluation in these online courses, I think, really needs to be addressed at the higher level, and it can't be online versus face-to-face or not. I think it's got to be a university policy that goes wide. There are certainly ways to load it up into Blackboard systems, so when they load in their site, it pops up. Because I've taken classes that have done that specifically at UMass, Shane. So these things can happen. It just has to happen. I love the fact that you guys are building your own evaluations. I wish you didn't have to spend all the time to do that, to understand that. But I think as faculty, we all are always trying to evaluate the performance on our particular assignments. And so I commend you guys for doing that. I just wish, I might get fired for saying this, but I wish the higher-ups would say, look, this is a big issue.
Let's make
right?
a commitment.
Yeah.
I think particularly as digital
institutional level.
instructors, since our promotion track is based on our evaluations, if you don't have a sufficient number even to create a valid sample,
Right.
like I said, if you have 150 students, you only get 5 responses, that's not representative of all the students that you have.
Right.
I'd like to agree. I think that with both of you, So if you're going to get fired, Chuck, we'll all get fired.
Yeah.
That institution-wide incentives, for example, when I was at the University of Miami, they implemented a view your grade 2 days earlier. We have almost 100%
That'd be great.
response rate here in the state of Florida. I've been told there's some kind of a law that prohibits that, but I have yet to find the law. I have looked, but of course, it could be buried in there in Florida policy. The students, we record our grades, right? I upload them as a faculty member, and a certain day they become available to my students. My students can view that grade 2 days before if they complete evals for each of the courses they're taking, not just mine. So they have to complete every single evaluation for every course they're taking, and they can see that same grade that I already recorded that they're gonna see 2 days later. And they want to see it so badly that almost 100% of students. They have surpassed the face-to-face paper evaluations. You know,
Great.
they're almost 100%. So I would say that at the institutional level. In the meantime, to Kathy's point about engagement, I think part of the problem at the end of the semester is the students don't see the point, right? And so we can see that if we do a mid-semester eval, and that there are stakes for them. So we can say, give us your feedback, give me your feedback, I'm going to use it. And then we use their feedback, we show them that we've used their feedback. But I think even then, at the end of the semester, they might think it's too late, this isn't going to benefit me. So if we take the time to show them how they have benefited from the evals of a preceding year, and now they have a responsibility to kind of pay it forward to the next generation, the next cohort, I think that might be motivating. And not going to get you to the numbers of the institutional-wide incentives, but I think now, reminding them at the end of the semester, you had this benefit, I made these tweaks because of the class before, now you pay it forward to the class that's coming, and please give me your feedback so that I can use it also. Yeah.
I do that in my final discussion board is I ask for specific recommendations on how the class can be improved. Identify something you would change, something you would add, so that I can try and identify some kind of pattern so I could tweak it for the following semester.
Yeah, and
I'm sorry, my
Yeah,
question is more for the room, for everyone who seems to be aware of this, but why aren't students, I mean, I was a student here, and I always filled it out. It just seemed like kind of a rote exercise. Why aren't students, because I guess I was surprised when I only had 2, you know, after the first semester. What are the reasons students are saying they're not filling the forms out or doing it online?
It's not in front of them, it's not at the
Not in front
time,
of
they
them.
just don't,
It's easy to ignore.
it's very easy to ignore.
Yeah, they forget about it. Some will say they don't even remember getting an email about it. You know, so it's, most of the students that I've actually spoken to, this is not a scientific survey or anything. You know, they basically told me, oh, there's course evaluations for the online classes? Really? Yeah. You know, that's mostly what I get from them. So it's not, they're just not seeing it.
And also something that, just to build on something that Kathy said, I mean, I know in my online courses, you know, I'm very engaged with my students, and when I encourage them to fill out the survey, I said, look, it's a big deal to me, you know, it helps me improve
Right.
the course. And of course, I also supplement that with my own survey. But they, once they know that it means something to you, that it's important, and that their opinion can make a difference, then they're more apt to do it. But a lot of the students I've spoken to in my courses since 2003 don't really think that their opinion makes a difference, and so they don't do it. So I mean that's been my experience. And then once I engage them and I say, yes, you can have a positive impact on my teaching in the future, you know, oh, okay, great, you know, and then so it's as Kathy was saying, it's engaging them and letting them know why it's important.
Just as for anecdotal evidence, again, not scientific, you know, I've noticed that when I tell my students, when I present them with something that I have changed from feedback I've gotten either from a student that semester or from students previous semesters, I always let them know, and I let them know what the change was, and I let them know why. And if it's something that a student recommends that I can't make that change for some reason, I also let them know, and let them know why. That, you know, oh, you know, I think that's a great idea, but, you know, these are the reasons why I can't do that. My anecdotal evidence is, it seems like within days, every time I do that, now I start getting more suggestions.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Let me tell you how to teach this course.
Hi. It's good that we're having this discussion because I just had an idea of what I can do with my online class. And I guess it's sending them an email, not only to remind them, but one thing that I do in my face-to-face classes, so the students know that those evaluations are not going to the garbage can, I actually open the FIU website where the results of the professors are posted. And I tell them, this is where it goes. Whatever you feel, it's here. And those are important for the chair to know things about the instructors, professors who teach in the department. So I'm thinking that one of the ideas that just popped in my head since we're talking about this is I should do the same for my online. Send them an email with a link of where the results are posted and let them know that it's important.
Okay, do we have any other questions, any feedback on evaluation? Okay, let's move along. On question 5, what tips could you offer to manage large class sizes and eliminate issues such as cheating and plagiarism?
Breathe deeply.
Take a couple hours.
Yeah, I mean, I think I use a lot of what are considered best practices when it comes to these things. I use groups with my larger classes. I use Turnitin. I use large test banks. When it comes to writing assignments, I will create writing assignments that they can't just go to Wikipedia and copy and paste, or if they do, it's really obvious. Occasionally, I will rotate assignments and change assignments. Just make things as tailored as I can, keeping in mind I still have to have time to grade it all, which is, another issue. I don't think I have a magic bullet myself. I don't know if anyone else does.
I second all of those, and I'm excited about the iPeer.
Yeah, I don't think there's just one right or wrong answer. It's all up to your, what I do, I like to try to build the assignments so it's almost impossible for them to cheat. Right. Almost impossible. Someone's going to figure out how to cheat. Right. It's just what happens. But if you can put in things like trying to interpret data graphs in front of their face instead of something that can be cut and paste off the web, the questions are a little more meaningful. It's all about, do you want to ask low order, easy, copyable questions like true, false or something? Or do you want to ask something that is tough for them, they have to think about to answer, and reduce the number of large scale summative type exams, and inject more formative type of along the way, so it's they can provide these more authentic type of experiences where they can demonstrate what they're learning. That's applicable to the course and their lives, rather than everything's dependent on these 2 midterm and final exams like I used to have in undergrad days. I'm still for exams. People have said, well, so you can get rid of all your exams. No, I'm still for exams. It's just as a part of the total package. So I don't think there's one magic bullet for anybody. I think it's just figuring out what works for your discipline in a reasonable number of assignments that's going to be reasonable for you to grade. Shane, sorry, you have 90 papers to grade. Right. Yeah. And that I think can also come from a lot of conversation with your peers about what could be done. What are some interesting ways in which we can do this in an online format? Some thoughts.
I remember some years ago I took a personal safety course, and they had at one point an officer come in and say, listen, if you can just deter someone for 1 minute who's trying to break into your house, the chances of them breaking into your house plummet. And so when I think about the cheating issue, I think about it in those terms, like what's the point at which it's going to become so uncomfortable or so expensive for them to do it that the likelihood is going to decrease, is going to plummet. And so I'm not looking to to eliminate cheating. I know that I can't do that. But can I make the numbers plummet? You're straight. I can, by designing, just like Chuck said, you design assignments in a way that makes it extremely difficult for them to cheat. And really, to tell you the truth, you guys probably already know this. I mean, we all have PhDs in our fields, and so when we look at something, we know when they're cheating. We don't need Turnitin.com to tell us, all the time. We just look at that and we know, okay, well, in their summary, they have like a 12th grade level, oral and, verbal and written communication, and this is graduate level work, And so I catch students sometimes, and I just send it back to them and say, you got a 0 on this. If I find it again, I'll report you. And
Let me just mention one other thing that this is, again, from just my personal anecdotal experience. When it comes to, I guess, what I call purposeful cheating, as opposed to students who are plagiarizing and really don't realize it, I actually have caught more people purposefully cheating because they're turned in by a fellow student. And what I really find is that those are the students, the ones that will turn them in, are the ones that tend to be the most engaged. And so I think that really, I don't know the research in this particular area, but it seems to me that if you can have your students even more engaged, this is more reason to have our students engaged. They're going to take it personally if they find someone else cheating, and they're going to turn them in. Because it's happened. I teach a lot of students, but almost every semester I have someone turning in another student because they cheated.
Also, just to build on that a little bit, as ridiculous as it sounds, I've had graduate students take my classes who really don't understand what plagiarism is. They really don't. I know, but they don't. And sometimes they've been allowed to get away with things in other classes, or they just haven't been caught. Let me give you an example. In one of my GIS courses that I teach, I had a graduate student turn into me a homework assignment that was a 5-page homework assignment that was, because I said you have to cite, if you have a quote, you have to cite it. He turned in a homework assignment that was 98% quoted, but he cited everything.
Oh,
there was not
interesting.
one original thought.
According to Shakespeare.
That is so interesting. Wow.
And I gave him a very low grade, and he got very upset. And he said, but I followed your directions. And I said, but there was not one original thought of yours in that homework assignment. I'm looking for how you think. I'm not looking for how these other 5 people think. So even at the graduate level, and certainly on the undergraduate level, I think we have to be very clear on what we mean by plagiarism. Because even if you spell it out, sometimes you have a crazy example like that, and kids will turn stuff in like that and think it's perfectly acceptable. So,
And sometimes you can't even, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
oh, no, go ahead.
Sometimes you can't even blame the students, though, because it's the way we've written it. It's our assignments that are promoting them to answer something in some way that we didn't intend that to happen. So we can be just as responsible for almost setting them up. It's almost like that classic right triangle. And there's a 3, 4, X on the hypotenuse, and it says, find X, and the kid just circled the X. And said, I found it.
Right.
There it is. It's on the paper. Well, we wanted him to solve that X equals a number, right? But so why am I wrong? Kind of thing. Well, the reality is, if we write to instruct our essay prompts to say, find 3 sources to convey an idea, they might do that. But if you want to understand what they think about those sources and synthesize that into the meaningful response, you're all very educated and smart people. You know how to do this. But sometimes we're too smart in our field, and we have to remember that we're sitting here teaching, and that we have to come back and say, oh, wait a minute, look, I just need to rewrite this. What I want you to do is use 3 sources to support your thinking and how this might apply to blah, blah, blah. And say, I always try to take a step back and look at my assignments and make sure that I think I'm asking them what I'm hoping to ask them, and always follow up on an email and say, if you have any questions at all, please email me just so we can talk about it. So.
Something that's worked well in my class, and that I think is a good opportunity, is gamification and simulations. In one particular module, we're learning about federal budget. So instead of just copying from Wikipedia how the federal budget process works, they have to take a federal budget challenge where they have to go in and create their own revenues and allocations. So everybody's individual answer is very individual to them completing the assignment. So there is no copying and pasting or completing the same assignment. It says their name, they have to log in. Their printout has all their information. So, and because it's going to be different, it's very personalized.
That's a great example. I teach an intelligence and surveillance course, and it's a graduate course, and I have my students complete a simulation that was done by Department of Interior, and at the end of that, that if they succeed through the simulation and not killing anyone, it's a terrorist attack simulation. If they succeed in not killing anyone and getting all the way through, it generates a certificate for them that's different each time for each student, and it has their name on it. So there's all sorts of interesting simulations that are on the web like that you can find that they can't cheat on it. There's absolutely no way. So.
Just a couple of quick practical ideas too. When I'm writing my discussion questions, as much as possible, I ask students to utilize examples from their own lives. You know, like talk about a recent date you had. You know, it's kind of hard to cheat when you're making up a date, you know, and relating it to some sociological concept. And then I also, with my exam, I have exam pools that I just load into StudyMate, and I say, here you go. Those are the questions, you know, that I want you to know, and they can quiz themselves on it. And then each week I have them writing at least 2 questions to add to the pool. So each student is adding to the pool of questions, and then I just pull together several lessons, and everybody gets a random 50 out of, say, 250 questions. And, you know, so there's no way that they could, you know, again, it's a matter of, like, somebody would have to really, really be dedicated to downloading all of those questions somehow.
But sometimes they do.
Yeah, right.
Like Course Hero,
Exactly.
things like that. There's
Right.
companies that hire these kids to do this, and all they needed is once, right?
Right.
And then it's good to go. But I agree, that's a
But the
pool is
adding the
a-
questions and
Yeah.
changing the pool every semester is so awesome that
That is
way,
good.
because it's
That is
never the
good.
same.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That is good.
Any other questions, concerns, feedback? Okay, well, this brings us to our final question for today. So, you know, we've gotten a wealth of knowledge today. We had our FIU Online folks talk with us about some of the new technologies that are available to us. We have Sarah talked about the resources that are available at the library, and we've had a keynote address, you know, and so I know we learned quite a lot today about MOOCs, gamification, flipped classrooms. So I want us to think about where we're going from here. What is the university of the future? What is that going to look like? What do you foresee? What do you anticipate? So with our final question to our panel members, what can we expect, or what do you anticipate will be the future best practices for online higher education?
Well, I'm a big fan of gamification. Well, I'm a little biased in this because I actually do research in this area, but I think the more of the inclusion of gamification and social media elements that help engage our students more are going to be coming more and more to the forefront. More of those technologies are becoming available as standard. We're also learning more and more about how they really can increase not only engagement, but also student learning. And I think that that is really one of the directions that we're moving in, and making it easier for us to be able to incorporate these things into our classes, because right now, even though there's some of it, it simply is not very easy to incorporate, and it takes a lot of planning and a lot of understanding. And I guess the second thing I would add, which I don't know if this would be considered a best practice, but where I would hope it would be going would be having a better understanding of what online teaching entails at the university level, at the departmental level, and from other faculty. Because there's, you know, there are issues with, you know, being able to get enough resources and having people understand just how much you need in terms of resources to have quality online classes and quality online programs. That is not there now. And so now I think a number of us, you know, there's time that we could spend really improving the online learning environment, but part of our efforts have to go towards helping other people understand and even convincing them that these are the best practices and this is what you really do need to do to have quality online teaching.
Right, you really can't just teach thousands of people with a click of a button. You know, it just doesn't happen on its own. It
That's
takes
a-
a lot of work.
It does, and that's a myth that I think we're all dealing with.
I think we are example of the future of online education.
Yeah.
That they've created digital instructor positions, whereas it's not just, they're realizing this is a specific path and it requires a little bit more hands-on, and it's created its own position, and I think that's giving it more credence. And also the fact that public and nonprofit organizations are getting into higher education is increasing the reputation of online education.
Yeah, I guess I would just add a final thought is, I personally don't think that every single program and every single course belongs online. I believe that the FIU is a university that has a lot of buildings that have classrooms that need people to sit in them, or else everyone is going to go away and be fired, right? And it's just going to be us teaching thousands and thousands of people. But there needs to be a compatibility between online, face-to-face learning, and I don't think personally that it ought to be one or the other or something, or flipping or hybrid. It should be all about university learning, and it should be all about departments organically growing programs that make sense for their particular majors and students that reflect what needs, the best needs of society. And we, as the experts in the room, need to figure out, can we do it online? If we do, what kind of resources do we need? And can only secure those resources when we say this is going to be a good, viable program, and there needs to be professional evaluation done. I mean, it's a whole field. It's not make a course and throw it on Blackboard and that's the end of it. You know, I hate digital instructor. I don't even know what, people, what does that do? What's a digital instructor? I get it. I'm one of them and we're one of them, but we're really faculty that do all this work. And realizing that this field of online education isn't going to go anywhere, but neither is classrooms. They're going to have to stay open because there's an infrastructure that needs to be supported here. And so they can coexist and they can co-grow together and relate on each other to fundamentally grow the university in directions that make sense. So that would be my takeaway for thinking about holistically kind of higher online education as it moves forward. But a lot of work to be done, though, for sure. I've seen Penn State's World Campus programs, and it's intense. I mean, there's a lot going on. They have residency requirements, and they're around the world, and they have military programs and all this. I mean, it's a big, big thing. So maybe FIU will be there one day. We'll see.
Any other comments about the future?
We ought to have a 7th inning stretch.
Well, I want to thank you all for coming very, very much. I mean, this has been really wonderful, and I want to thank our panelists here, the digital instructors, Kathy, Deborah, Chuck, and Agatha. And we really appreciate your participation today. It's been really wonderful, and it's a lot of you are our core group who really help make online learning a lot better on a regular basis. We'd really like you to fill out the survey that's in your folder.
Please fill out your evaluation.
One will be emailed to you.
And
It's very important for you to fill out your evaluation. We use that information.
And I have an important announcement, something that I mentioned earlier, and I now have a date and time here. The United Faculty of Florida, the collective bargaining agreement, and online teaching. Implications for faculty work assignments, work conditions, evaluations, promotions, and salaries, all relevant to everybody sitting in this room. The date for this is Thursday, April 17th, from 2 to 3:30 p.m. in GC Graham Center, 271A. So it's open to everybody, okay? So make sure and show up. I'll be there, as will probably a lot of you.
Yeah, I'll be there too. And if you ever have any questions about the collective bargaining agreement, I'm on the executive board now of the UFFFIU, and would be happy to investigate if I can't figure out the answer to your question.
And also just something I mentioned earlier, also in your folder, there's that description of the 2 softwares that we now have available. Don't forget they are available to you free of charge. So if you would like them, either the Adobe e-learning suite or the Dragon transcription software, email Chantel or me. And we'll get you set up. There's also training included in that, and we can get you set up with training as well. The link, we've been recording this forum all day, and the link for this will be available on the CAS website within about a week and a half, and we will send that out to everyone who RSVP'd, so you can review it if you like. Also, we've had a couple of requests for how this can count toward participation. So if you want any kind of certificate of participation, email Chantal or me, and we'll send you a digital version that you can print out. So if you want that for your records or professional development, something like that. So with that, thank you very, very much, and we really appreciate everything, and have a great weekend. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.